Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss about the topic coastal regulation zone. So the first coastal regulation zone notification was made on 19 February 1991 for declaration of coastal stretches as coastal regulation zone and for imposing restrictions on industries, operations and processes in the coastal regulation zone. So if you look into what exactly the Environmental Protection Rule says, according to Clause D of Subrule 3 of Rule 5 of the Environment Protection Rules 1986, the central government declares the coastal stretches of seas, bays, estuaries, creeks, rivers, and backwaters which are influenced by tidal action up to 500 meters in the landward side from the high tide line, that is HTL, and the land between the low tide line, that is LTL, and the high tide line as coastal regulation zone. So what is this HTL? HTL is nothing but the high tide line on the land up to which the highest water line reaches during the spring tide. So this is called as HTL and the low tide is called as the LTL. And the next is there are classifications in this coastal regulation zone. So we have 4 classifications in this coastal regulation zone. So what are those classifications is that is CRZ 1, that is coastal regulation zone 1, CRZ 2, CRZ 3 and CRZ 4. So having known these classifications, let us know what each CRZ zone refers to, or what are the areas which fall under CRZ 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now first let us look into CRZ 1. Areas that are ecologically sensitive and important, those areas fall under CRZ 1, such as national parks, marine parks, sanctuaries, wild habitats, mangroves, and any coral reefs, areas close to breeding and spawning grounds of fish, marine life, or any outstanding natural beauty, historical or heritage areas, areas which are rich in genetic diversities, areas likely to be inundated due to the rise in sea level because of the consequent, which is consequent upon global warming, and such other areas are the areas which fall under CRZ1. And included we have also area which falls between the low tide line and the high tide line under CRZ1. So these are the 2 important areas which fall under CRZ1. And the next is CRZ2. So what kind of or which kind of area comes under CRZ2 is the areas that have already been developed up to or which are close to the shoreline. So developed area means what? It is referred to as that area within the municipal limits or in other legally designated urban areas which is already substantially built up and which has been provided with drainage and approach roads and other infrastructural facilities, like it could be water supply and sewage mains. So overall, if we look into CRZ2, what it tells us is that it is basically a developed area which falls under the municipal limits or legally designated urban areas with basic infrastructure. And the next is CRZ3. These are areas that are relatively undisturbed and those which do not belong to either category 1 or category 2, that is CRZ1 or CRZ2. So they will include coastal zones in the rural areas, that is developed and undeveloped, and also areas within municipal limits or in other legally designated urban areas which are not substantially built up. In the previous category, we said that those are substantially built up areas, but CRZ3 areas are not substantially built up areas. And the next is the coastal stretches, that is the CRZ4 is related to coastal stretches in the Andaman and Nicobar, Lakshadweep and small islands except those which are designated under CRZ1, 2 and 3. So these are the areas which fall under the 4 categories, or we have come to know as to what are these classifications based on. and what are the areas which fall under CRZ 1, 2, 3, and 4. And moving on next as to what are the permissible activities in CRZ 1. Why have they classified these areas into 1, 2, 3, and 4 is to regulate, basically to regulate the activities which are carried on these areas. So now we will look on, or we will look into as to what are the permissible activities in CRZ 1. So we already know as to what are the areas which fall under CRZ 1, and now we will look into as to what are the permissible activities which can be carried out. The first one is projects related to Department of Atomic Energy, or it could be pipelines, conveying systems including transmission lines, exploration and extraction of natural gas, construction of trans-harbour sea links between LTL and HTL, that is the low high tide line and the high tide line, and the construction of dispensaries, schools, public rain shelters, community toilets, bridges, roads, jetties, water supply, drainage, sewage, which are required for traditional inhabitants, the people who are residing there from a very long time and who have become the inhabitants, traditional inhabitants of that place. And the next way is the permissible activities in CRZ 2. So these here, what does it include is buildings shall be permitted only on the landward side of the existing road. And the second one is facilities for receipt and storage of petroleum products and liquefied natural gas. Facilities for generating power by non-conventional energy sources. It could be so in non-conventional energies like solar energy, thermal energy, or wind energy. And fourth one is construction of airstrips and associated facilities in the islands of Lakshadweep and Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And also desalination plants can also be set up in this CRZ2 area. And the next is the permissible activities in CRZ3. Here there are up to the area which covers up to 200 meters from the high tide line is to be declared as no development zone. So the state government, with its permission, or it may permit construction of facilities for water supply, drainage, and sewage for requirement of local inhabitants. And the second thing which is permissible there is agriculture, horticulture, gardens, pastures, parks, playfields, forestry, and salt manufacture from seawater is permissible. So these are the things which are permissible in CRZ 3. And the next important thing which falls under CRZ 3 is that development of vacant plots between 200 and 500 meters of the high tide line is permitted with the prior approval of the Ministry of Environment and Forest. So what are those things are facilities for storage of petroleum products and liquefied natural gas, desalination plants, generating power by non-conventional energy sources, construction of airstrips and associated facilities in the islands of Lakshadweep and Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and reconstruction or alteration of an existing authorized building are the things which are permitted in this area. And the next is CRZ 4. So CRZ 4, here it says no new construction of buildings shall be permitted within 200 meters of the high tide line. And secondly, the buildings between 200 and 500 meters from the high tide line shall not have more than 2 floors. That is ground floor and the first floor. And the total covered area on all floors shall not be more than 50% of the plot size. And the total height of the construction shall not exceed 9 meters. And the next is the design and construction of buildings shall be consistent with the surrounding landscape. And the corals from the beaches and coastal waters shall not be used for construction and other purposes. Dredging and underwater blasting in and around coral formations shall not be permitted. And there is no restriction on the traditional fishing and allied activities undertaken by local communities. However, no untreated sewage effluents or solid waste shall be let off or dumped in these areas. So those were the things which was permissible or which are permissible in the CRZ 1, 2, 3, and 4 areas. Now, looking into the prohibited activities as to what are the prohibited activities um, in these CRZ areas are, the first one is setting up of new industries and expansion of existing industry, except those industries which are directly related to the waterfront, directly needing foreshore facilities. Second is manufacture, handling, or storage of disposal of hazardous substances. Third, setting up of fish processing units, including warehousing. Fourth is discharge of untreated waste and effluents from industries, cities, or towns and other human settlements. Dumping of ash or any waste from thermal power plants. Mining of sand, rocks, and other materials, except those rare materials which are not available outside the CRZ area. Construction activities in ecologically sensitive areas. Harvesting or drawal of groundwater within 200 meters of the high tide line. Groundwater can be harvested within 200 meters and 500 meters of the high tide line, but for that you need to take prior permission from the concerned authority. And the next is altering sand dunes, hills, natural features, including landscape changes for beautification, recreational, and other such purposes. Offshore exploration activities beyond 10 kilometers from the nearest habitated village boundary and ecological sensitive areas. So these are the activities which are prohibited in the CRZ zone, that is the coastal regulation zone. Having known as to what is CRZ and what are the areas which fall under these four categories, and what are the activities which are permissible and activities which are not permissible, now we can come to know as to what are these classifications based on. Looking into the first one, CRZ1, that is the Coastal Regulation Zone 1, is related to ecologically sensitive areas. Coastal Regulation Zone 2 is related to built-up areas. And Coastal Regulation Zone 3 is rural areas, where we said it is a no development area. And Coastal Regulation Zone 4, where it is a water area which is related to islands. So therefore, these are the four important categories under the Coastal Regulation Zone. And so now looking into the cases, the reference cases for this chapter would be, the first one is S. Jagannath versus Union of India. In this case, it insisted for stoppage of intensive and semi-intensive type of wastelands and wetlands for prawn farming, that is shrimp culture. And the second one is Goa Foundation versus State of Goa. Here the petitioner, he challenged the order of the Goa government approving demarcation of the high tide line, stating that it was not in consonance with their CRZ notification of 1991. And the third one is Indian Council for Environmental Action versus Union of India. And this was a PIL filed by a voluntary organization questioning the amendments made to the CRZ notification. And the fourth is Center for Social Justice versus Union of India. And this was a writ petition challenging the environmental clearance given by the state government to the Gujarat Electricity Board for the thermal power project. So I hope you have understood what exactly CRZ notification means, and what are the different categories which come under it, and what are the areas which fall under it, and what are the activities which are permissible and not permissible, and the reference cases related to it. With this, we end this topic of the coastal regulation zone. Thank you.